if I went back, I'd do it again because it was important that we got vaccinated. I don't resile from supporting the vaccine, but personally, I was too entrenched in a pro-vaccine view, and I crossed a journalistic line, in my view, for the greater good. But I crossed that line. I've got to live with that. I'm sorry about it, looking back now.
It's the Super Saturday, all these events going on around the country, and so you were asked to be involved.
Yeah, phone call, got a phone call, and it's all pretty random, We're thinking of having a vaxathon and using Avalon Studios. I was a strong proponent of the vaccine. I'd been reporting on it and watching things happening, and personally I was really worried that our health system wouldn't stand up. I remember not long before it, I'd interviewed some doctors and nurses from the intensive care in Wellington who, were saying we're just going to be crushed. We're just going to be crushed by this if people don't get vaccinated. And, all these different things. I knew in my area there was lots of Māori and Pacifica and got a lot to do with people in health and in my home area as well. And I know they were worried. And so, I was keen to, get vaccinated myself. I was keen to encourage other people to get vaccinated, and then, the vaxathon came along. So a couple of things. I mean, obviously it was a good chance to promote that, but hadn't been doing a lot of work either over, by that stage it was nearly 2 years, I think.
Yeah.
People won't like this because of how divisive the vaccine is, but it did actually sound like fun to go along and encourage people. Yeah. And I know that's going to sound bad to a lot of people, but, that's part of what I was thinking. And, the other part was, it would be cool to be part of something like this and boost the vaccination rates as well and try and get us out of this mess. The rest is there for everybody to see, dancing around and, however many hours it was of, it was actually fun to do it. It was really fun to do it. I know that's going to hurt a lot of people saying that, but it is what it is. And I understand now that, me being in the vaccine made a lot of people angry.
Well, let's just before we talk about that. So, did it cross your mind at all that there would be any potential blowback, or and also did you consider, am I crossing a journalistic line here?
Yes, totally. And I'd been feeling that for a little while. Put stuff on my Instagram about getting vaccinated, and I'd deliberately gone down and got vaccinated. I'd deliberately gone out and got vaccinated with the Tokoloan community. Someone I knew who's Tokoloan had asked me to come down and get vaccinated there, and put it on my social media. They live around the corner from me. There's a big community. So I said, yep, I can do that for you. And then the second time I went to the local marae, and, in both times I, thought about it beforehand. Yeah, I knew that I was starting to cross a line, into being pro-vaccine. And the media were very pro-vaccine. Everybody I knew was pro-vaccine, and, just all around. And that's no excuse. You've still got to do things, but, I knew that I was starting to cross a line. And then with the vaxathon, something I could have said no to, I had a good think about it, and I said, yeah, no, I'm going to go out there and promote this thing and try and play a small bit in getting New Zealand out of this hole we're in. Was the way I looked at it.
And then, how quickly did some fallout come?
Fallout about being pro-vaccine, pretty much. I mean, I can't remember when it started, but I would have thought it started on the day.
Right.
It would have been what I would have thought. I would have thought it started on the day, and you know, you see it through your Facebook. That would be the main place. I've got a big Facebook, I've got a big Facebook following, and, posted in those days quite a lot on there and still do. And I think through the Facebook, really, instantly people would probably have been into me on the day of the vaxathon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're talking, more than 3 years ago now.
Yeah.
Have people forgotten?
I would say that I'm reminded of the vaxathon nearly every day. Yeah, and mainly in comments on Facebook if I post, pushing the vax, got your second jab, got your booster, these things, all of these comments we'll never forget. People always be there and reminding me of the vaxathon. There's lots of clips that they use of me dancing with Ashley Bloomfield, that kind of thing. Yeah. Get the sweet taste of Pfizer is something that I said. It's quite shocking. And I know that this, like I said, I'm not making light of this. I know what people think now, and it is embarrassing to see some of the clips. It is, but it is what it is for me, and it, if I went back, I'd do it again because it was important that we got vaccinated. I'd do it differently, but I would do it. I'd probably do it again.
Let's talk about another story. So you reported on a doctor down in Canterbury, we'll say.
Yeah.
Tell us about that story.
Yeah, there's a doctor in Canterbury, and one day somebody got in contact with me and said, "Hey, my son's just got one of these," and it was a vaccine exemption form. And she said he's getting them from a doctor, and he shouldn't have one. There's a doctor giving these out in Canterbury, and told me the name of the doctor and showed me all this stuff and had a look at it, and she explained that heaps of people were going along, and her son had owned up to her, and she was worried that there was a doctor who was putting people who didn't have the exemption, allowing them to have an exemption, and they were wandering around Christchurch and Canterbury. Looked into it, and that was pretty bad, really, for a doctor to be. Yeah. In my view, at the time, it was pretty bad for a doctor to be ignoring these rules that everybody else in New Zealand was adhering to, including a lot of people who didn't like it, right? A lot of people didn't want to do it, but they played by the rules. I really respect those people. So we ran a sting operation. We got a guy I knew who's a really long-time senior journalist, an older guy, and we chucked him in a work vest, and he had pretty strong Kiwi vibes, and we used a camera and a pen that was in his pocket, and we sent him into the doctor, and he come back out, and we'd been able to listen to everything inside. It was a bit like a spy movie. I'd never actually done that before. And, we were out in the car, and, the recording was coming through, and we could hear a lot of it. And then he came back and, "Yep, this is what happened, mate." And, then she said this, and then she said this, and then she said this. And then, I signed it, and I paid the money, and here's my vaccine exemption form he had in his hand. We're filming it. Okay. Waited for the doctor to come out at the end of the day. Confronted her. That's what's called a doorstep. It's what you do when you need to get a comment from someone and they'll never front. So, waited, and a doctor came out, very quickly nipped away, kind of chased her a little way down the street, tried to get the question to her and whatnot. And then, of course, broadcast the story, and, it raised this whole issue that there were doctors out there doing this, that she probably wasn't the only one. There's probably a few more that really didn't believe in the vaccine and wanted to help people get around it. But of course, brought up a lot of frustration from people who had got the vaccine and were annoyed that there was someone doing this. And it was a really, really big story at the time.
And an important story.
Oh, it was a massively important story. A massively important story at the time. And, raised a whole lot of questions for how she'd be investigated and what it was and, what about these people that were, how many of them were, because the place was packed the day we were there. There was a lot of people in the waiting room going through and getting these. Word had really got out that this is the place to go if you needed an exemption. And so that was there. But on top of the vaxathon, that story with the doctor really made a lot of people hate me, like properly hate me. And people, I was pretty surprised after that I was like, far out, there's just a lot of support for this doctor. And, because a lot of people viewed her as a freedom fighter and somebody who was, which looking back at the time, I just like, what do you mean? But kind of now, I do kind of wish I'd, instead of chasing her down and kind of leaving it at that, I do kind of wish I'd actually tried to talk to her, because it would have been good to get that perspective of a doctor who really didn't believe in this thing. I know she was breaking the rules and everything, but...
So when you say people hate you for it, tell us in practical terms what that means.
People hate me for the vaxathon and exposing the doctor, and people say I wrecked their life and, that I should never have done it, and they say that to me nearly every day.
Do you people, apart from online, is there anything else happens?
Yeah, I've had really awkward encounters in public over the vaxathon. Just comments, oh, I've seen you here and, I saw you there today and stuff like that. A lot of people had a lot of those. I never really worried too much about them. I don't want to make too much of these things.
Sure. Yeah.
But a couple of really awkward encounters in public where people have come up and hit me up. Once in a cafe, a guy in Christchurch came up and it was just pretty ugly what he said. Yeah. Yeah. It was pretty, just out of the blue. It was just yelling at some guys in a cafe, and a guy came up and said, what you did to that doctor, it's totally wrong, And then also down in Canterbury, really nice-looking guy with his daughter, looked like he just walked out of church. It was Sunday morning, saw me, bang, what you did to that doctor's a disgrace. You disgust me. Just like that on the street. In a weird way, I kind of understand it. I know, I'm not, I can understand why people would hate me over it. In that position at the time I couldn't, but now I can. And
what do you mean by that?
They were just treated so harshly by society, and the media, being a very big power in society, did not treat people who were suspicious of the vaccine very well at all. And I can totally understand how someone can see someone promoting using the thing that they hated, taking down a doctor, doing something that they thought was right, in their view, misusing the privileges that, I've got of all this stuff. I can see how someone would want to hate me for that. And, that's never going to, that's never, and I am sorry about it. And I did get things wrong along the way. After all this went down, people get in contact, and we'll have to get his name again. But, the guy is a friend of a friend or whatever, and someone wanted to get in touch and talk to me. And he'd taken the vaccine, this fella, and he had myocarditis or pericarditis, one of the heart things. And him and his partner had both been pro-vaccine, very pro-vaccine. They came from that really traditional kind of New Zealand family and professions, and that, everybody was pretty much pro-vaccine, right, And anyway, this fella ended up with pericarditis or myocarditis, and he'd nearly died a couple of times after the vaccine. And he had all these be familiar to journalists. You know, he had all these medical forms and stuff and bits highlighted and different doctors and all of these frustrations. And basically he'd found it really hard to be believed in the medical system. And interviewing him, you know, his own family didn't really believe him. And here's all the evidence and everything. The guy definitely had myocarditis or pericarditis after having the vaccine, and all of the things he talked about, and his partner was there. You know, it all stacked up. You know, this guy had a vaccine injury. He'd done the right thing.
Which is the thing.
He'd take it. It's a thing. And he'd done the right thing. He'd taken the vaccine. He was on board. And, you know, this guy nearly died and was there. And the aftermath was, you know, terrible for him. People didn't believe him. His own family didn't believe him. So he's sitting in front of me like you are now. And, of course, my mind's whirring as well, because it just showed up the way that I'd been so judgmental and to all these other people. And it just, you know, journalists should be helping and fighting for these people sometimes, and we weren't. We actually was more convenient for us to ignore them or push down on them or push back at them rather than listen to them. And that was my realization that, oh yeah, I got some of this wrong. And whether, you know, people can jump on this or whatever, but that's the way that I feel. I'm still pro-vaccine, but we got it wrong. We were too harsh on them, and that included me. I know that I said harsh things at times as well about the protesters at Parliament. I just wanted them out of there. I wanted the thing over. I wanted people to get vaccinated. I wanted to get back to normal. And in that process, you know, my journalistic, well, they are ethics, you know, and some of the basic rules went out the window. And I'm allowed to regret that, and I do. And I'm sorry to those people. As
a country, it seems like something broke through COVID.
Oh, yeah, it broke.
Do you reckon?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, the country broke. There's no doubt. I mean, I've spent my whole life around this country and talking to different people and up and down, and, you know, I know personally I broke, you know, as an alcoholic, I was, you know, I remember the booze coming around, and, you know, the craft beer guy was dropping around in boxes, and I was dropping money into his account and, you know, and stacking it up and chewing through the craft beer, chewing through the red wine, you know, hitting the gins. Became massively depressed, frustrated about my work, you know. And so I know that it broke me, right? And then you just extrapolate that out to all these other people. But yeah, as a society, we broke for sure.
Do you notice that even now?
Yeah. You notice that there's just an edge out there in New Zealand. Everybody just become more angry and grumpy. There's just this edge has been left that wasn't there beforehand. You know, and you sort of just you just see it all around. It's just like the heavy feeling, that grim, gloomy feeling has just never really lifted. One of my biggest lessons of my career, 25 years of journalism, is having dealt with just so many different families in just terrible situations. You know, it might be Pike River or murders or, you know, parole failures or accidents and all of these things. You know, I've seen so many of them. And they all want one thing, which is closure. And when they don't have it, when there's these questions about what happened, or they've been let down by this, or someone's holding something back and they just can't get to that full reason, they struggle. And they struggle for years and years and years. And a lot of these families don't get it. And I've got a lot of experience with these type of people. And closure, it's, you know, is one of these really, really important things for people. And I just look at the whole of New Zealand doesn't have closure over COVID. And until we start to get that, not just individually, but as a nation, like, we're going to struggle to deal with it.
The year is 2020 and a deadly pandemic is raging all across the globe. We are locked inside, we are terrified, we are baking